What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm excited to have you here today. I'm talking with Travis Gibb, comic book creator and writer, Kickstarter phenom, and we're going to talk a little bit about his book, Voodoo Nations, and I'm sure plenty of other things. So with that said, why don't you introduce yourself, Mr. Travis?
Good morning. I'm Travis Gibb. I apologize for the hair. It's been a rough morning so far. But yeah, I'm Travis Gibb. I'm a comic creator. I created, best known for Broke Down and Four Dead Bodies, but some of my other books are Voodoo Nations and then Cthulhu Invades Oz. Everyone was a big fan of that when that was a thing. So yeah, I'm glad to be on the show.
Awesome, man. It's good to have you here. I haven't checked out the Cthulhu Invades Oz, but I do remember when that dropped, they did the like D&D campaign sort of thing, and yeah, that was a blast.
Yeah, so how that went down is I was on the stream, and I really like those comic burrito guys. That was the first time I met them, and I just threw down a challenge. I was like, if we can get 10 backers for physical books during this stream, I'll go ahead and run a D&D game for me, because we were talking about how I run D&D and like how I'm kind of a geek. And they did it. I think they got like 12 or 13 backers on that stream. I was like, all right, let's do it. So then I ran a Dungeons & Dragons game for them as payment for that those backers.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it was a blast. I used to play D&D whenever I was younger, like post high school, you know, and like those early college years. Like we would all get together like every weekend. So that was fun to watch, because it's something I've kind of wanted to dip my toe back into, but it can be so time consuming, and I've already feel so spread thin, you know, but it was fun to watch because it really got me back into the spirit of it.
Yeah. I mean, you can go to like once a month games and stuff like that, but most people, once you get the bug of like playing, you want to play a lot. And, you know, with families, it just makes it really, really hard. You know, I have one game that's every other week now, and like we've missed it. We missed it last week because I was on vacation, and then the next one we're going, I'm also on vacation. It's just a different vacation. So it's been a month, and it's going to be crazy, but that's all right. You know, these things happen. Yeah,
absolutely. I do a show with the guy on Wednesday nights, and we've kind of missed like we missed yesterday because he went on vacation, you know, and we missed like 2 weeks ago because I was out on vacation. So it's like this thing right now, especially like in the post-COVID world, right. You know, people have been locked away for a year. So on top of just summer being vacation time, it feels like everybody's trying to get out, especially this year. So
right.
That is what it is, you know, but it's good to get back out into the world some, you know.
Yeah, no, it's really good. You know, I just, right before I started this, I paid for my MegaCon table, you know, and that's super exciting, you know, a big major convention coming back, and see a lot of my friends, you know, getting their official invite to New York Comic Con. It's really cool to see these things coming back into fruition. And at the same time, getting an email from San Diego Comic Con saying, here's our lineup for San Diego Comic Con at home. Like these vast different things, you know, at the same time.
Yeah, it's crazy like how this has been like a global thing, but the response has been kind of different across the country. And so you have, even in the reopenings, we're kind of seeing things like where there's like big events going on one end, and the other end they're still kind of trepidatious. So it's interesting to see, but I think that's a really good question to ask you, because I know you do a lot of Kickstarters and stuff, and you're you know, substantially independent creator. So how important were cons to you pre-COVID, pre-shutdown and stuff? How important was that to your art and your business?
It's hard to say. It did keep me going, you know. It helped me pay for art faster, you know, because I could, you know, I'd make a few hundred every table. You never make a lot of cons. It's more about connecting with fans and doing stuff, but you make a couple $100, you know. At a bigger con like MegaCon, you can make, you know, in the grands or stuff like that. But we're so big. I mean, we have like 5 cities, you know. We got Miami, Orlando, Tampa, you know, Key West, all these different cities. So we're blessed that we can do cons pretty much every weekend if we wanted to. So I was doing a lot of them. I was gone almost every weekend. But yeah, it helped me pay for art faster. So it has slowed me down a little bit, but my Kickstarters have been doing better too. You know, when I first started this, I was, you slowly go up. I had about 100 fans, so I'd always get 100 backers, and now I'm at like 250. So I'm trying to get that, that poetic, thing. If you get 1,000 fans buying your stuff, you can make it a career. So
yeah,
I'm, quarter of the way there.
Yeah, there you go. That's what it takes. Yeah. I know you had mentioned, Cthulhu Invades Oz broke down in 4 Dead Bodies, and then you had also sent Voodoo Nations this way. Yeah. So why don't you tell me a little bit about not just like those books individually, but kind of your style and what kind of stories you like to tell.
Yeah, so I like to tell, when I tell a story, I like to tell something that's a commentary. I like to make a commentary on stuff, or bring back something that I feel is missing. So for Broke Down in 4 Dead Bodies, for instance, I really miss the Quentin Tarantino movies, the Guy Ritchie movies, the Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, the Reservoir Dogs, and even like, Way of the Gun, like that crime genre of like a couple of guys getting in a bad situation, and trying to deal with it. That genre kind of went away. We still have like mobster movies, and we have like high-pack action movies like the Hitman's Bodyguard, but like those crime movies kind of went away, and I missed them. So that's where Broke Down in 4 Dead Bodies came about. I really wanted to tell something in that vein. So, it's about 2 guys break down on the side of the road. They got 4 dead bodies in a case, and everyone's out to get them, from the police, to the mafia, to a Mexican drug cartel, to a biker gang. Everybody's out to get them, and it's a who's done it with a twist, kind of those fun things. So I wanted to bring something back. And the other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to hit the crime genre in comics. Crime is always the lowest selling in any company, but I wanted to do it in a different way. So I wanted to do it very clean, not very, when you get a crime comic book, it's very dark, and my line art in that is very, very clean, very semi-anime, semi-cartoony. So I kind of wanted to do a different way. And I think it worked for what I wanted to put together. For Voodoo Nations, it's the other way. I'm a Christian, and I've done mission work, and I've met a lot of people in the mission fields who just really they shouldn't be out there. I'm not trying to be negative. They just shouldn't be out there. They don't know what they're doing. They end up getting like one of their mission, some girl in Brazil pregnant. Like, that's not what it's for. Like, what are you doing? Yeah. So I wanted to do kind of a twisted version of that, of what happens, with these missionaries who are ill-equipped, and they go against someone who's practicing their own religion of voodoo. And I really wanted to, show, that other religions can do good things, just because you don't like the way they're doing them. So that's where Voodoo Nations could be about, kind of tackling that. It's also kind of a showcase marriage. I went through a death a few years ago. My mom died, and when my mom died, I didn't know who I was. And you don't really see this a lot in issue 1, but in issue 2, you really play it out. I didn't know who I was for a little bit. Like, you lost a piece of you, and I couldn't find it, and I knew it was missing. And kind of like putting that on paper, and what's that like, in kind of a supernatural form. When you're there, but you're not really present. You're not really the person you were, and you're trying to figure out who this new version of you, because grief does that. It takes over you, and trying to figure out what that is. So that's where that came from. And Cthulhu and Invades Oz is, I just wanted to make a comic with all these awesome people I've met in comics. Like, I've met all these people from Scout and Source Point and Aftershock and all these different companies, and I was just like, let's make a comic together. I like anthologies, but I find them boring. When you read an anthology, like, oh, I like this story, I didn't like this story, I didn't like this story. So I wanted to do an anthology, but I wanted to tell one narrative. So I found a way to do that. So Cthulhu Invades Oz, even though it's an anthology, there's one narrative. There's a beginning, middle, and end to the stories. So I thought that was a lot of fun. We're doing the sequel, Cthulhu Invades Wonderland, and obviously it has a even bigger cast because I've met more and more people.
That's awesome. Yeah, let me ask you about anthologies. I want to touch on that a little bit because I love 2000 AD. Yeah, and I think it's great, and I always enjoy like the stories I'm reading in there and stuff. But and so I'm always like kind of pushing, like I wish American comics would do more anthologies. But then like American comics come out with an anthology and I read it, I'm like, this just doesn't work for me for some reason, you know? So I guess like what's kind of your thought on anthologies and why they seem to work for one group or one locale, but then they don't quite work the same for the others? Do you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, well, I think that the American mindset is we put an extra thing of it, right? So the anthologies that we see, they always have a purpose, right? It's, Puerto Rican pride, or, dealing with, gun shootings or gay pride, or there's some agenda associated with it. And it's not a bad thing. It just is. So when you get that, you're kind of being preached to. And I think that that's one of the problems. And even when you get like a Marvel or DC, like anthology, when they do like the annuals, they still have like one sort of narrative, or they don't let them play, right? They get all these young rookie creators, and they're like, and all these rookie creators, all they want to do is tell the biggest story they can in 8 pages, and it fails. Versus like a 2000 AD, they're like, those are more like, I'm pitching you a series that I want you to pick up. And I think that that's the difference. We don't have any in America that are, this is what we want to do, and they're going to pick up. The last one that we had was a book called Negative Burns. Have you ever heard of that?
Nuh-uh.
So go to an old comic store and look for copies of Negative Burns. I'm actually in one. I have an image credit for Negative Burn. But that's where you'll find Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, Brian Michael Bendis. You'll find all their early works in that. And it was kind of built like that, where you kind of tell the story and you're basically pitching a series. Like you're trying to be like, hey, buy it. And it was done by Caliber for a long time. Then Image took it over, and then a comic company called Desperado. But it was designed to be kind of a pitch magnet. And I think that that's the difference of why it works over there and stuff. None of the local companies do that. The only one who ever did it, and I'm not a fan of the company, but it came out on a Wednesday. Peter Sumeti's, I can't even think of the name of his company right now. What is it? Alterna, yeah. Oh,
Alterna, yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of Alterna, or not because they don't have good stories or whatever. It's just the $2 price tag. They're all the little things that they think are unique. Like that's not interesting to me. I'd rather have better quality paper and pay the full price. But then it came out.
I'm the same.
and it kind of worked that way.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's a good thought though, because one thing I like about 2000 AD is they're telling these like little segmented stories, but like it's kind of a series in its own, and right. I've come to know a lot of great names. Like Out of Body recently came out, and that's written by Peter Millage. Okay. And I recognize his name from some of the stuff I've read in 2000 AD, but although like that's all in a universe, I guess, at the same time, like it's not trying to be like this interconnected thing, each right. series just kind of like carries over,
Well,
on the other hand,
anthology.
Go ahead.
Heavy Metal's an anthology.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah. That does really well, in the American markets. I mean, that's where Donny Cates came from, and a lot of the bigger names that you're seeing now is from Heavy Metal. Yeah.
Yeah, I also read like the new Batman Urban Legends, and I think that kind of speaks to the problem you were talking about. Like I've wanted for a while now, I've wanted DC to do an anthology where it's like one-off stories of their characters, where right. like I just have like an 8-page Superman story. And Batman Urban Legends kind of speaks to what you were talking about, how there's this agenda. Like these are all Batman characters, and they're trying to build out their stories in the Batman universe instead of just telling like a good one-off story with these characters. So that's probably a good point, And
it's weird. I mean, I love Batman Urban Legends. I'm loving the Jason Todd story. I'm loving that. I'm loving the Grifter story. I love, especially last issue, the Deathstroke scene was fantastic. Him and Deathstroke kind of hanging out. But again, the problem is that it doesn't feel like it matters. And even though these are top writers, Chip Zdarsky, these are great writers. But it doesn't seem like it matters. So at the end of the day, where is it going? Do you need that, right? And it's skipping timelines, right? Because you've got the what is it called? The Infinity timeline.
Infinite Frontier.
Batman Beyond's coming in a couple of issues.
Yeah. So yeah, it gets really confusing for the reader. Like, how much does this matter? How much is it all connected? But I guess let's talk a little bit about your process too, because you're a writer. I don't think you do artwork, right?
No. I'm just a writer.
So like, how do you go about finding your artists, and what's the process to like get to somewhere where you have art that you feel like really matches your story and a creator you can work with?
It's really hard, right? I just broke the barrier where it's not about price anymore, right? So early on, I could only afford this amount of money, so I had to find someone on that amount of money, and it struggled, Broke down in 4-Day Body. I've got tons of publishers saying we love the writing, we don't love the art for our company. It's not that they're saying the art is bad. It's just the art is kind of a little cartoony. It's a little anime-ish. I wish I had one right here. I was not prepared. I got a VOODOO Nations, but I don't have a broke down here. They're all packed up because I'm doing shipping for fulfillment. So that's been stuff. And then when I got to VOODOO Nations, the art's good, but it's, people are looking for a certain genre. And nowadays, there's so many Kickstarters and companies that are taking Kickstarter properties. They want them finished now because they know that you can get it paid for and finished. So they'll accept your stuff, but they want it completely finished. So I just signed up for my third book. It's called Granite State Punk that I'm doing. I have a couple other books that you're going to hear about before that, but Granite State Punk, and I'm really paying a good hefty price. And what I did is I really just looked for this style, finding comics on the shelf that are very similar and being like, all right, this is selling. This is kind of my style. Can I mix something together and trying to figure that out? It's a really hard thing. Like people think it's easy, but finding that right person, and then you don't know these artists, right? You don't know their workload or stuff, because some artists are fantastic, but they sign like 5 or 6. They have a decent price rate, but they have like 5 or 6 projects going at a time. So they'll do 1 page here, 1 page here, 1 page here. So I'm only getting 2 pages a month. Well, if I want to do this as more of a career, I can't do that. Like I need someone dedicated to my stuff. But you got to pay for that, right? You got to pay these guys. Like if you want me to be dedicated to your stuff, you got to pay that extra dollars to make that work. So, I normally go through the message boards trying to find stuff. I'm friends with David Byrne over at Scout, so I tend to bounce my ideas of artists over him, see what's going on. But sometimes you even find guys who don't work well, I have a book called Expired coming out. I'm not going to put the guy on blast and what his name is, because by the time this interview comes out, no one will remember. But I just didn't enjoy working with him. Like he was very, very, the money was more important than the art. And I'm okay. I want everyone to be paid, but like, he's not even letting me look at the artwork and compare it to the script. He's like, I sent you, I need this. So you've got to deal with that. So there's a lot of drama behind the scenes, and it shouldn't be, because, it should be fun, especially at this level, right? We're not all professionals yet. We're just kind of kickstarting and doing our thing. Let's have some fun. Let's try to build it. And then, the extra frustration is there's a cost. So I can get an amazing artist from Italy, amazing artist, right? He'll blow you away. Looks like a Marvel and DC guy. You're impressed by him. But if I get him, I have to do all the work of promotion because he can't do anything, because getting it in Italy doesn't help me. I need it in the US market and stuff like that. So I can go the opposite way and get a US guy, but the US guys know the value of $1 a little bit more because they stuff. So they want to accordingly. So I'm paying double what I pay for this guy who's better than the American guy, but I get this guy to also help me promote and do like podcasts like this. So it's such an interesting animal of this stuff.
Yeah, that is something I've heard about, is like in Italy, Kickstarter's not a thing. So that's kind of a weird process for them to get involved with. They just basically want to do the art and let you deal with it, because like apparently Kickstarter just isn't very popular in Italy. Correct. And so they don't really think of it in the same way that we do. But I want to ask you too, because I think that kind of speaks to like the collaborative element of making comics. Like, how do you work with your artists? You mentioned one guy, like he's just kind of putting everything together for you and sending it over. But I'm sure you've worked with other artists where it's kind of a back and forth, and they're taking your script, and kind of putting their own spin on things. And so like, I guess kind of where's the give and take on all of that kind of stuff for you?
Yeah, that's the hardest. Every artist is different, and every artist has a different thing, and you got to trust them. And you got to, I've been doing this long enough that I know when to pick my battles, right? Like this page, I need it a certain way. I'm going to fight this page, but if I fight for this page, I can't fight again for 18 because then that artist is going to be frustrated, right? For page 18. So do I want page 12 to be perfect or do I want page 18? The odds of me getting both of them are very, very slim. So what does that look like? So each artist is different and how they work on it, and even how I write the scripts. I have certain artists who want me. So when you write a script, there's no right way to write a comic script, which is a weird thing. There's the Marvel method. There's all these different ways to do it. But I have artists who want me to tell them how many bubbles are going to be on a page at the top. So I'd have to go like page 1. There's 8 panels, and there's 12 word balloons. They want to know that because they want to know how much room they have, and some of them don't, and they'll just leave the room because they can figure it out. So it's finding that balance and doing that. I love collaborating, especially early on when you're creating the character concepts. Like Bishop Lucas is such a good character design. Luke Stone came up with an amazing thing, and we just did a StreamYard and we kind of talked about it. Oh, I don't like this. I do like this. And I send references to different things that I like. That reference, are you a 2099 fan?
Like the Marvel future stuff? Yeah. So yeah, I'm vaguely familiar. I didn't read a lot of it, but I'm vaguely familiar.
Yeah, X-Men 2009 had a character called Halloween Jack, and he had a lot of cool movements. If you Google him after we talk, he's the inspiration for Bishop Lucas. I wanted him to look very similar to that because I wanted those gangly movements. He was very skinny. Halloween Jack actually happens to be Loki in the future in 2099.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's weird Marvel stuff. But I wanted him to look like that, but I also wanted these certain face marks and tattoos. So it's trying to balance that, especially with Voodoo Nations, because we introduce a new voodoo priest every issue. So doing that, and then when Cthulhu invades Oz, I got to approve all the characters. So I want to make sure that they're familiar. But the reason why there's an approval process is not because I'm trying to be egotistical, but it has to be based off the books. So if it's like the Disney movie, I have to make sure that I address it early to make sure that they're not in trouble, so there's no lawsuits and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that go into that and building these things together. Yeah,
and I guess like the one other like kind of more process-centered question I want to ask is like I guess like what is your background? Because you mentioned like there's no like right or wrong way to do a comic book script. So like, have you done classes? Have you done like the comics experience kind of thing, or is this just like you putting it together as you go and watching some YouTube videos or whatever else?
No, so I have a degree in film. So I moved to Florida to become a filmmaker, and when I went to film school, I realized that I really had a knack for screenwriting. So 90% of the films that were produced during my 4 years of being there were mine. So if there was a group project, which is, in film, it's mostly group projects because it just makes the most logical sense getting more, students together. They were written by me and like put together. Even other people's scripts are like, all right, here we agreed on this concept, but Travis is going to write it. So I was really good at script writing, and I always wanted to be in film. So like we talked about Quentin Tarantino earlier, Kevin Smith, I would buy their script books and write it and read it and go through that process. And then as I started going to conventions, because I was still a comic fan. I was always a comic fan. But comics are so unique. You don't know how to get in, right? You don't know how to do that. Like film, you're like, all right, I'll just make a movie. Like, cool. Like making a comic book, like everyone has taken a picture or a video, right? We've had video cameras. But if you don't know how to draw, how do you do that, right? How do you find a guy to draw for you? How do you make it good? How do you make the panels right? How do you bring it to a printer to have it print ready? Like, how do you do? I didn't know how to do that. So it wasn't until I went to film school, I met this guy named Stefan Nilsson. He's the lead director over at Aftershock. He does their marketing. He had a book called Government Bodies, and I did a 4-page backup, and I started learning the process, and I started going to cons and signing things. And that's when I got the negative burn idea thing, and I was at a few anthologies. And was doing some work and started going through that process for a long time, and then broke down 4 Dead Bodies. I decided to do on my own and make that process go through, and now it's full force. I have this year probably 12. I think it's 12 or 13 books coming out this year.
Oh wow!
So it's crazy. I mean, I have a Kickstarter live right now. I'm in Modern Mythologies, which is an anthology about basically takes on old myths and how we twist them to today. So I took remember in all the old Greeks and Greek gods and all the Norse gods, they'd always have these big meetings, and that's when they'd call each other out and do stuff like that. It's all those mythologies. So I wrote that. It's like a meeting of all the gods, and they kind of meet all together as like a big summit and like talk about the year. So Thor's doing really well because he's got the Marvel movie, and Loki's got his TV show. But the Egyptians aren't doing so well. They haven't been doing so well since the Brendan Fraser mummy days, and kind of how that goes.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's super fun.
I want to say Matt and Noah of Constructing Comics and Dino Thrashers and all that. I think they have a story in there as well.
Yeah, I think he's in that. I'm pretty sure he's in that book.
Yeah, I think they have a John Henry story or something like that. So yeah, that's interesting to hear you talk about that, because it's something that keeps coming up, and so I need to look into that one. I don't think I've looked it up yet. So yeah, that sounds really interesting though. A lot of fun.
It's got a few weeks left. It's got a lot of good creators. It's funny because Kickstarter has it's funny. Kickstarter's like its own publisher. So like there's certain people who are the higher echelon of Kickstarter. And I kind of just made the cut recently, right? So now I'm in anthologies with all the other guys who we have a couple of creds outside of our thing, so we've got these things, and people are following us from our Scout books, our Source Point books. And it's a lot of fun because it's like its own third company, even though we're all independent doing our own thing. But there's people and the names you're like, oh, I know that guy because he does enough stuff. And that's how it works. It's just about creating things. If you talk to any comic creative, from Brian McManus to anybody, they'll tell you the way to get into it is make comics. That's it. That's how you get into comics. You make comics. And then you make a few bad ones, and then you make some good ones, and then you keep going up, So I make it, I'm right now at the point of selling Broke Down, so I have 2 people who made me offers, and I got to figure out which one. And then we'll see it in stores coming through. So the Diamond's the second level, and then VOODOO Nation's after that, and kind of building that stuff. And now I'm at the point where I'm building stuff. People don't realize, they're like, well, why don't you just go to the primary distributor? Why don't you just go to Scout? Well, let's kind of talk about that process. So let's say I have a book with Scout. All right, so I need to create the book from scratch. So it's about $4,000 to make a book, give or take. So it's about $4,000. That's paying the letterer, the colorist, the artist. Hopefully you getting paid. So it's cost about $4,000 to make a book. Well, if I send it to Scout, they're going to want at least one alt cover for their web store. All right, so now I've got to get at least 2 covers. Now, if I do well, which I want to do well, right? I've got to sell it to store exclusives. So now I have to shell out more money for store exclusives. Okay, so now I've got some store exclusives. So now I'm at the 5,000, 6,000 range. Okay, cool, no problem. Now we're at 6,000. Okay, now Scout's got it, and now they're going to solicit it. Okay, so I send it to them. It's going to be about 3 months before it even gets into previews. Another 3 months before anybody can order it. Another, and then another 3 months from that till I get paid. So we're talking like a 2-year process of me putting out a lot of money before I even know if I'm going to get money back.
Yeah.
And that's tough. That's a tough thing,
Yeah.
We're Kickstarter. I finish, I put it live. Let's see my thing, and let's go from there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one thing you kind of touched on there is there has to be an audience for that, just because you create a comic book and you can afford to front all that money to get it published out there, if nobody's going to buy it, that's a complete loss. So, I think that's another part of the work that's very difficult for a lot of people, is you got to build and grow that audience, like you were talking about earlier, get to that 1,000 true followers so that you can make sure that all of this is commercially viable as well.
Well, we saw it last night. I don't think they're going to see this video, so we had somebody pitching a Kickstarter in a Discord group last night, but they don't have any relationship with anybody, right? So they're just pitching, so it's not going to work, and it could be the best book in the world, but like we're all chatting about other things, and you're pitching your Kickstarter, right? There's a time and place for those things, and how to build those fans, and trying to figure that out. And early, you make a lot of mistakes. I'm not judging them. They clearly said this is their first Kickstarter. So how do you do that? But when you have those fans, you can then use that for leverage, right? When I go to a scout or stuff, hey, here's why you should pick up my book. Not only this, here's how many people already backed me. Of that, a percentage of those go to comic stores. Because there's people who will never go into a comic store and just back things on Kickstarter if you don't know. They messaged me, hey, you said that you want to put this in a publisher. I don't buy from local comic stores. How can I still get it from you? When it's like, what? Like, sure, but like, really?
Yeah.
You like comic books. Well, why do you need to buy them on Kickstarter?
Yeah, and that's something that I think is relevant, because like when you're trying to move more into that realm, like you said, you want to make this a career, right?
Right.
And so if you're an independent creator, if you're working in the indies, like you're putting in a lot of that work and effort, but to really make it a career, you're going to have to get to the point where, like your book goes to a store and people come in and buy it. And so like, well, you don't want to like forsake your entire Kickstarter audience at the same time. Like, you need stores to know that your books are relevant, that your name brings an audience into their store, because the stores have to be able to make money too, and just because you get it into previews doesn't mean they're going to order it necessarily. Like, hand selling goes a long way. A name goes a long way. I think at the highest tier, we've seen that very recently with James Tynion, his newest book, Nice House on the Lake, launched with like 160,000 books. Right. That's a huge number for people that don't know. Like, in the modern era, you don't sell that many comic books usually, even from the big two. So an order of 160,000 on a first issue is very impressive, and so a name in this industry can carry you a long way with an audience. So it's important to like build that out,
But, well, I mean, look at anybody. So there's two things I want to tackle. So can you bring up the Voodoo Nations again, the cover?
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is something I want to say. So that's a collective, that's a store exclusive. That's a collective. That's their store exclusive. And that's why it says a collective there. Even at this level, I really encourage people who are following this, who know me, like, get store exclusives now, because what's cool about it is that comic sold more than their Marvel and DC. They ordered, I think it was like 200 copies of the main cover and then 100 of the Virgin. They now can sell any Travis Gibb book that comes in their store. And yeah, it's one store, but now I've got a name. So when I get that diamond order or that stuff, that's going to help me go to that next level. When I get that source point or that scout, oh, that's the guy who's been here, because they're now following my path and with me. So taking that into, looking the people who've made it in the last few years. So you got Brian Michael Bendis. Brian Michael Bendis has been around for a while, but he's had his Bendis World message form since as long as the internet's been around, and still comments on it in a day, building that fan. You look at Donnie Kate, he's got the Donnie Advocates, he's got the Devil Advocate shirts, he's got the two podcasts with him and Stegman. It's part of the gig. So everyone who you like, from James Tierney to Cullen Bunn, they all have either a Patreon or they have a newsletter where you can get more intimately involved with these guys. I think that that's part of the business. And I think if you're not willing to do that, you probably shouldn't be in this business, right? Like, I'm right now looking at my Patreon. It's scary, right? Because I'm really good at Kickstarter. Like, people know me for Kickstarter, know I can make a decent amount of money. You're not concerned about fun, but when I ask you, hey, can you give me a couple bucks a month? What does that look like, So the thing I'm thinking about doing is actually building a series with my Patreon people. Like, keep it super fair, but like, here's 5 ideas. Which ones you guys like? Let's vote on it. All right, cool. We're going to make it a comic book. Let's pick an artist, and we're going to pick an artist together as a crew. Mm-hmm. And what that looks like. I think it'll be fun and kind of building that audience together to get to that next level, and then make decisions. All right, do we want to Kickstart it, guys, or do we want to start pitching it around? What do we want to do? I think that that's a fun thing that I can do, and it's helping me build a fan base that I am resonating with, that I'm committed to, you know. The reason why we're friends or even having this interview is because I am committed to fans and people who like my work in comic fans. Like I love comics. Like there's a lot of writers out there, especially in the Kickstarter market, who haven't picked up a comic in years. They can't tell you what's hot right now. I can, you know, just, you know, finishing up my list for this week, you know, all that stuff, you know, I have $50-something a week. It was crazy.
Yeah.
This is my read stack. I'm still like super behind.
Sounds like me, yeah.
Right. But I actually read these things and I love it, and I love being part of communities. So, you know, you and I are part of the burrito community, you know, and I'm active in that community, and I think it makes all the difference. And I get some honest feedback. You know, I've got honest feedback from Todd and been like, hey, I didn't really like issue 1 of Voodoo Nations, but you let me read issue 2 and I really, really got it. And I'm glad I stuck around. Getting that feedback. Okay, cool. What did you not like about it? So we can address that and I can be better, right? Because we need fans who are going to reach out to us to be better, because I want to be the best at this. You know, I don't want to just stop. My goal is to work for Marvel and DC. I really want to work on a stuff. You know, my goal is to work on that. I don't care if it's a 4-page backup in Superman red, white, and blue. I don't care. And I hate Superman, just for the record. Like, I don't care. Like, that's what I want.
Yeah. Yeah. And to speak to that, like, you know, like we were talking about, like the true fans, like I believe there's 2 sources of those, and they kind of expand out a little bit from there, but like newsletters and, you know, like Patreons and stuff. Like I give Colin Bunn money every month because I love his Patreon. Yeah. He's doing the thing where he's like building a comic book from the ground up, and that's invaluable, you know, if you have any interest in how comic books are made, because like you said, it's kind of like nobody really knows how to get into comics. Everybody has their own route. So somebody that's been that consistently successful, that really interests me to see how he does it, you know. And then you were talking about podcasts as well. I listen to way too many podcasts. So for me, that's a very important medium because of course I watch YouTube and I see YouTube and I enjoy YouTube, but there's something about having somebody right there in my ear all the time, you know, that really gives me a connection. And I feel like once you take that video away, like people become a lot more honest and open. And so I feel like those are the strongest connections, because I can tell you, like, as somebody who's kind of in the community, you know, like I talk to a lot of people that read a lot of comic books, and they say some like really weird things sometimes that I'm like, no, you're completely off base, because they might be fans, but they're not like, and this is going to sound a little cocky, but like true fans. Right. For instance, I read newsletters. Like I read everybody's newsletter that I follow. So for me, Empire of the Tiny Onion is one of those that I read a lot, from James Tynion. And he's talked pretty openly about the things that have went wrong with his Batman run. And even more importantly, he's talked about how he got a creator-owned project with DC. Like, he was in a contract, he had an idea for a series that he thought would be a huge success, and he was willing to walk away from that contract to get that book published, because he was in an exclusive deal. He couldn't start a new project with a different publisher at the time. And so DC was like, you know, he kind of bullied DC into working with him on doing a creator-owned thing. But then I like talk to people that don't read newsletters, but they're like Tynion fans, and they're like, oh yeah, I think that DC, you know, went to him and was like, we want you to do something like the indie books that you make. And it's like, no, you couldn't be farther from right on that. They were uninterested until he showed them the numbers that would make it work and kind of pushed them into that realm, you know. So I think there is like a sense of true fandom in that. At least if you're interested in comic books, I think you should also be interested in how they're made and what it takes to get it there. Not necessarily like be the most thorough, deep knowledge kind of person, but it's a weird process, and understanding that can make all the difference in how you perceive and receive a book too.
I think, you know, thinking about that, I think it's the best correlation for an average person to understand. I think it's like wrestling fans, right? So there's people who watch just the pay-per-views, you know, so they watch just the big thing. There's people who watch all 3 shows, and there's people who just read the dirt sheets and watch the SummerSlams, the WrestleManias, the Royal Rumbles, but they don't watch the other stuff. And yeah, they're all fans, but some people are actually seeing these people rise. And, you know, those are the people who are arguing, why does Roman Reigns get to fight Joe Cena? I don't know who Roman Reigns is. I'd say, well, he's been on TV every week doing all these things. Like, you didn't watch. You read a dirt sheet that said this much, you know?
Yeah.
I get those all the time, especially when I'm doing interviews of people who are like, you didn't actually read that Batman run. You read a synopsis of that Batman run, and you're trying to talk to me like you know about it. Like, let's not have this talk, good sir. Like, 'cause we're not on the same league. And it's very frustrating, especially me who's in this and loves comics in every aspect, when someone's just like, mainstream comics are dead. I was like, they're not. They're doing some of the most amazing things. You're just not, either you're not reading the right ones or you're lying. You're just lying because it's pushing you forward a little bit, you know? So, you know, they're the same people who are posting Saga right now. Well, I love Saga, but it's not relevant right now. They're like, I bought Saga. Cool. Good for you. Thank you. It hasn't come out in 3 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Glad you're catching up. Good to see that Brian K. Vaughan is still relevant. He's not writing comics right now, just so you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, it gets frustrating sometimes because, like, I'm in so deep to a certain extent, you know, and there's so many people that I talk to that are just, like, kind of on this surface level, and I'm very grateful for them, you know, the dollars that they spend on books and stuff, like, very important to the industry, but sometimes for me, like, I hate to, like, hear somebody's story and be like, oh, I'm into them, so I'm into this book. Like, you know, there's a new Power Rangers book that just came out by Frank Gogol, and I've been following this dude since, like, 2017.
Sure.
I've read everything he's put out. I love the way he writes. Yeah, and so, like, I love the way he writes, but now, like, his first, like, real major, like, mainstream book is this Power Ranger book, and there's so many people that, you know, they're like, oh yeah, he's so great, and, like, because he does a lot of podcasts and stuff. He figured out pretty quick that that's how you get your book sold. Yeah. And so he sold himself to a lot of people before that book even came out. So, you know, even before the book dropped, these people are like, oh, it's going to be so good. You got to get it. Everybody go buy my friend Frank Gogol's book. And I'm like, credit to him. He sold them on that. But, and the book is absolutely great. I'm not saying it's not. But at the same time, like, I read that book and I was like, oh yeah, I see Power Rangers and I see the Power Ranger fan and I see the Frank Gogol writing versus these people that are, like, just sold on him because he was real friendly on their podcast or whatever, you know? So there's, like, all these layers to how these things play out and how they work, you know?
Well, and can you imagine, like talking about Frank, you know, I'm glad that you brought that up because I really wanted to have a conversation about it. And I didn't have anything scheduled because I'm not on Kickstarter right now. I mean, I'm on an anthology, but I'm not promoting, like, pitching buy VOODOO 2 or buy this. You know, imagine being Frank. You've done your work, you've done your source point, you've got a couple of books that are source point, and, like, even, like, self-admitted, he talks about No Heroin. We don't know if No Heroin was actually a hit because, you know, it was supposed to come out, like, right when the pandemic hit, but it didn't. So then he had another 8 months to promote it, right? Before it actually released. So, like, he doesn't even know, like, self-admitted. He's like, I don't even know if it really is a hit. I just know that, like, it did really well because, you know, I was talking about it. I kept talking about it. It didn't stop. Doing a book. So let's say my work, like, one of my dreams is Ninja Turtles. I grew up where the Ninja Turtles came from. Really want to Ninja Turtles. The odds of me coming in and being able to add something to that mythos is very, very slim versus what Frank got to do. He got to go into Power Rangers and create a new Ranger, right? That is so cool. First out of the bat, get to create a new Ranger. You know, man, that's awesome. That's so. Well, I even bought it. It's
not necessarily a new Ranger, but it's definitely the most we know about this Ranger. Because he did appear in the show, but, like, very briefly. Like, he's somebody that, like, shows up and leaves. We never see the guy. He's always in the suit. Okay. And so we really didn't know anything about him. And, like, if you know Power Rangers, like, it's footage taken from Japan, and so, like. You know, like, there's all these things where they have to, like, work around, like, all the language and cultural stuff, you know, and so it was like he shows up and he leaves and we don't really know anything about the guy, and I'm sure the Japanese version they explored it more, but I mean, like, credit to, and then, like, some of the other stuff that happens in that book is things that have been, like, hinted at, and they're, like, very broad strokey. Right. And so reading that book, like, seeing Frank get to come in and really define that character, like, the Phantom Ranger was somebody that everybody that's ever talked about was just like, yeah, he looked really cool, you know, like, they describe him as, like, this awesome guy, like, he's real powerful, you know, But for Frank to get to come in as a fan and really just like hammer down and be like, this is how this guy works and this is what makes him and everything. Like, to me, that's really amazing and fantastic, you know, and all the other stuff that goes in there. Like, you know, we get some stuff on like kind of like the witchcrafty side of Rita's powers. She was just a moon witch for us, you know, like that's all she ever was in the show. She never really did any like hocus pocus stuff, but we see in this one like her mom using like actual like witchcraft, I guess is the best way to put it, you know. And so that's cool because that completely expands out the universe. Like, there's so much Power Ranger stuff, and for him to get to put something in there that can just like completely alter the way we look at everything that already existed.
Yeah,
I can't imagine the dude's not over the moon for what he got to do with that book.
Yeah, no, I mean, he looked at yesterday. He did a big post about how, you know, how big it was and how big of a deal it was. I actually haven't met him in person. I'm going to meet him. We're having dinner in MegaCon. You know, I'm going to sit with the Sourceborne Press guys because, you know, I'm really well connected to that community. So it's really cool to be able to do something like that and do that. And to be able to do that, you know, one of the things I was offered you know, it's already a done deal, so I guess I can talk about it. I was offered Peaky Blinders. You know the show Peaky Blinders? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've never watched it. I watched an episode. I know I'd like it. I know Con, they picked up, broke down, they saw it, and I got offered to pitch, but I had to pitch on Monday. Like so I was like, I'm not going to binge 12 hours of TV, you know, and pitch on Monday, so I'm going to have to pass. And I think that's something that Frank knew. Hey, I know this material. I can pitch. I can do it and do it right. You know, and that's kudos to him for doing it right. Because I've seen people who've had their shot, and you can tell that they don't love or respect the mythos of what they're writing. Mm-hmm. And this is their first gig. You know, someone says they're a good writer, so they get moved over, and they blow it. They blow their shot.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you know, to speak to that as well, like, credit and kudos to you for knowing, like, you know, that's not your thing. Like, it probably wouldn't benefit you that much. It definitely wouldn't come off well for you, you know, if you're not in it and you're not there, you know. And that's kind of how I am. Like, I grew up on Power Rangers, and you know, I've been reading all the comics, and I'm pretty into it, you know. But at the same time, I talk to like regular people, you know, just comic fans that are way better at like keeping up with the mythos and the lore and stuff. And so I know, as much of a fan as I am, if they like came to me and were like, hey, do you want to write a Power Rangers thing? Like, honestly, I probably wouldn't take it, because I would feel like I can't do it as well as some other people, you know. Right. And I think that's an important thing as like a creator, you know, to understand your strengths and weaknesses and where you can lean into yourself and what you know, and other times when maybe you should step back, or, you know, even in a sense like, oh, I'm if I'm gonna do this, like, I need a writing partner that is stronger at like the lore and stuff, you know, and I can do all of the other elements of that, you know. So that's really interesting, you know.
Going back to what you said, you know, when you listen to these podcasts, you know, I listen to Word Balloon, and I listen to a lot of these different podcasts, especially of comic people I like. Like, I listen to most of Donny Cates. I listen to most Chip Kwiatkowski's. I listen to a lot of Jeff Johns. Listening to their stuff, you hear about these big summits and stuff, and like, that's when they hear like somebody's leaving Captain America and they want it. It really, like, do I have a story? It's not just because I want to write Captain America or I want to get a better character. Do I have a story? You know, and that's where, I don't know if you know, I just listened to the, you know, Alan Ewing is coming to Venom, and Donny Cates is going to Hulk. That happened at the summit. They were sitting together and they talked about, wow, you don't want to continue after this, Donny? Like, this is where you want to end your Venom run? Here's what I would do. Alan pitched what he would do to Donny. And Donny's like, oh, if I was finishing up your run with Immortal Hulk, here's what I would do. Wait, these are great ideas. So they went up to CB and said, hey, can we switch books? And like, here's our pitches. And like, it was a done deal right there. It's knowing, you know, what's going on and stuff. Because you would actually think, and it's really kudos to Donny Cates for bringing Venom up. From Hulk to Venom is a step down. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. That's a step down pretty much.
No, yeah, I agree. Like, I think Hulk, personally, I like the Hulk way better, but and I think the Hulk is probably one of the most fascinating and greatest comic characters out there. But yeah, absolutely right. before Immortal Hulk, like how popular was the Hulk?
Exactly.
And
For years.
you know, leaving it, even though it's one of the best series that Marvel's been putting out, it's still not that far ranking as far as like general popularity, you know.
Right.
So that is like, for Cates, that's technically a step down, and you know, maybe he'll bring a lot of people into the fold and really expand out the fan base for that character. But yeah, it is kind of an odd thing to go from like basically one of the most popular characters that they have to, you know, unfortunately one of the less popular characters.
But yet on some level it's bigger, because you talk about the Avengers movie, right, versus the Venom movie, you know?
Yeah.
Because I don't know anybody who liked the Venom movie. Like, they all wanted a Venom movie, and we're like, it's okay for a Venom movie, so we're happy. But no one's like, that is my favorite all time. No one's gonna say that about the Venom. They're like, oh, cool, Venom movie. Cool, that's great.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's one that I haven't even watched to this day, because I know how like mediocre it was received, and he's just never been one of my favorite characters. So like, at the end of the day, what about that is going to drive me to watch it? Nothing really, unless it shows up for free on cable in the middle of a Saturday or something, you know. But I also think that swap is really interesting, because at least in my mind, those are two very opposite writers. You know, Al Ewing tends to deal in like internal strife and stuff, whereas Donny Cates is all about like family and generational stuff, a lot of like passing of the torch. So it'll be interesting to see how they swap and what they create out of those characters from where they're at now.
Well, and I'm super excited about Alan Ewing. Just he tends to tie everything, all the stuff together. I mean, Donny Cates does as well, but it tends to be lesser. But Alan Ewing, like, so how is he going to tie into Guardians? Because he tends to tie all these little threads together with his stuff. So
because he's doing Guardians and Sword right now.
Right. And Sword is, I mean, that last issue.
People say that last issue was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge Magneto mark. I have a Magneto shrine in my house, so like super excited. So him and Scarlet Witch was great, and that's after an issue with Dr. Doom and Namor, like the two of everyone's favorites. You know, to top that with Magneto and Scarlet Witch is just amazing, and he did it without ruining. You know, I'm not a fan. I want him to be the daughter, Scarlet Witch to be the daughter, of course, but to give us. All right, she's the daughter, even though Marvel says she's not. Like, here you guys go. That was for the fans who get it, you know?
Yeah. And you know, we're pretty far into this. Time flew so fast, but you know, let's talk just a little bit about Voodoo Nations, and I guess like kind of give the synopsis so people understand what this is and why it's so cool.
Yeah. So Voodoo Nations, it's my new series. You know, if you haven't picked up Broke Down, Broke Down just finished. So Voodoo Nations is where I'm at. I just finished issue 2. It's the Kickstarter digital download should be out probably this week or early next week at the latest. And what it's about is 2 missionaries. They go to Brazil. They meet up with this evil voodoo priest called Bishop Lucas. And he kind of messes up their day, kind of messes up their marriage. And it's following these 2 missionaries as they try to escape what happened to them in Brazil. And voodoo keeps following them. So they go to New Orleans next. And they still are entrenched in this voodoo world. And they go to Mexico after that, and they're kind of entrenched in that voodoo world. So we kind of do a world trekking adventure about this voodoo priest who kind of messes up their world. Yeah,
I thought it was really interesting, because they're sort of insiders, but they're also like outsiders, you know, like it seems like they've been there long enough that they kind of know like where they're at and the people around them to a certain extent, but they're also being introduced to this whole other culture. And so like voodoo comes along and they're almost dismissive of it at first, but he kind of shows them like, in no set way is it like all these things are connected to this like voodoo, but at the same time it's like, man, this is a lot of coincidental stuff. Maybe this is for real, you know? So I thought that was a really interesting play on things.
Yeah, I like to point out, when people talk to me about it, like the bad guy doesn't do anything bad he actually he's actually very helpful.
Yeah, he was like super nice to him. Yeah,
I mean, he was mean to them, but at the end, like he was super helpful. So, I like to point that out and kind of tie that together. And it's really telling a big arc. It's funny when you look at Broke Down. Broke Down was me. That was a story I've had in my head for years, and I really wanted to tell it. So it's kind of like I'm telling this as a fan, where Voodoo Nation is kind of like my adult. Like I really have something I want to say. So there's a story in there, like I mentioned, it's about grief, and it's about dealing with not knowing who you are and losing yourself for a little bit, and having people help you get to where you need to go. It's a long story about that under the reigns of voodoo.
Yeah, and I'm sure you know this story, but something that kind of came to mind when I was reading this, and I think it helped me connect to it quite a bit, was a few years ago there was that family in Mexico. I believe they were missionaries, right? And they got, for whatever reason, they ended up dead. And, it seemed like it was a cartel sort of thing, And so I think that's like the first time I really knew, like, I grew up in church, and
right.
They always talked about the missionaries overseas or in these other countries and stuff, but it was always this positive thing. Like, they've been living there for 15 years and
right.
all this stuff, And then whenever that story about the family in Mexico, I don't remember how long ago that was now, but that just really hit me with the sense of like, yeah, not all missionary work is necessarily perfect or anything like that, And so then reading this story and seeing how the locals kind of get involved in everything and how all that plays out, like, it just really reminded me of that and made me think about like the multiple facets of being in a different country and the things that are going on around you, and how you can make friends there, but you're still kind of an outsider, right. For a very long time.
Yeah, it's like any nonprofit. You deal with nonprofits; they're addressing a need, but is it what will help, right? Like, I can give a poor person, a family that's a drug addict, food and get them. I can pay for the housing and stuff, but if I don't fix the drug problem, I'm not really helping, right? I'm helping temporarily. I'm making sure the kids have a place to home. I'm making sure they're fed. I'm a good person, but I'm not actually solving the problem until the main crux of what happened. And that's what we explore, especially in that first issue. There's a big flood and they come in and they do the good things. They're feeding everyone, they're making sure it's stuff, but it didn't change the culture or the mindset. You didn't respect any of that. You just threw money at the problem instead of actually getting part of the problem, of what that is and the grief. So we kind of explore that a little bit. I have a Christian background. And even though issue 2 actually doesn't even address a religion at all, like, it's a religious book, but I like to point out, like, The Exorcist is a religious movie, but is it, do you go like, it's not,
yeah. I definitely thought, like, even in this book, like, it doesn't feel like cult, or it doesn't feel like religious. Like, it's not saying like, oh, like voodoo is bad or Christianity is the way or something.
Right.
It really addresses more like cultural differences, and so I thought that was really, I really like that because I'm not religious at this point in my life, right. And it's religion itself is very insignificant to me, but whenever you address it from a cultural standpoint, it still makes that story like engaging to somebody like me, because you're touching on things we can all relate to. That I was born and raised to a bunch of white people in the middle of Podunk, Texas, but my wife, she was born and raised in Mexico for most of her life. And so, integrating our family has become very much this thing where I'm seeing all these like different cultural differences, and sometimes those come together beautifully, and other times it's like a pretty big clash, and so that's what I thought was really cool about this book, is that religion is present, but it's not the focus. And there's not really a preachy message to it, other than like cultures are different, and we have to work together in order to like achieve the greater good, regardless of what we believe on that other level.
Well, yeah, and I think people, the people who say religion is bad, it's most people who are hurt by religion, and I get that, and we kind of address that in the comic. But what's Daredevil without his Catholic background? That's what makes him special. That's what makes him unique to the rest of the Marvel universe, is that Catholic guilt and that setting, and it doesn't fit the character because his name's Daredevil, like all these things. So I like to play with that, and I think religion done right is really, really cool. Especially when you look at like death cults and like the any Marvel or DC universe. You look at all these different cults and their agendas and what they do. I find it fascinating. those aspects, but I also like to educate people. So many people have read that and learned about Ash Wednesday and they didn't know about it because maybe their church didn't do it or whatever. They're like, is that a real thing? I was like, yeah, it's a real thing. And here's what it is. But if you think about, Ash, one of the things that I found when I was writing and studying, Ash is used in almost all of voodoo, which is the proper religion, it's not voodoo. Voodoo's religion. Ash is used everything. So it's a spiritual constant, right? So what does that look like? There's these similarities for everything, right? Every religion in the world tells us that we're broken and that something needs to be fixed. Like, doesn't matter what you find, like it's all there to fix something. So what does that look like? What are we trying to fix? So I try to get those universal truths and allow those to play out in my story.
Awesome. Well, I know you have things to do, and I don't want to hold you too much longer, but I guess if you want to give a streamlined sales pitch for Voodoo Nations and let everybody know where they can find you and how they can engage with you, because it sounds like that's something that's really important to you, and I would love to see more people engage with you wherever you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me at brokedown48bodies.com or voodoonations.com. Each of my books has their own website. Cthulhu Invades Oz. If you wanted to pick that up, it is available on Indiegogo. Just go to cthulhuinvades.oz, cthulhuinvades.com, and you can get there, not .oz. You can find me on Facebook or Twitter. I'm there most of the place. Jester Lou is my Twitter name, JesterLou, or Travis Gibb on Facebook. I'm always willing to talk or give advice if anybody has some stuff. And I really enjoyed talking to you. It was a lot of fun. So we'll have to do it again, Ryan.
Awesome. Yeah, I had a blast talking to you, man. Well, go ahead and enjoy the rest of your day and take care of your business. And hopefully everybody runs out and grabs Voodoo Nations, because I was able to read this first issue you sent and I really enjoyed it. So I think a lot of other people would as well.
Thanks.